Since the formateDate method accepts a string, then let's test handle empty string. Actual input is an empty string, and the expected output should be also an empty string. Then let's run our test, and our test failed. Our function, as we see, returns today's date. And this is not good. This should be corrected. So let's continue with invalid date. Invalid date, any string, and we expect the function to also return an empty string. And rerun our test. And now we have 2 failing tests. And even worse, we are having 1 failing test and an exception. So we need a plan. We need a validateDate method. And since we know what we want, let us better start by writing a function head comment. The validate should return false if the given date is invalid or empty. We will need a date parameter and a default parameter that contains the format. And we can validate the date by creating a date object from the given date parameter, then reformat it back to the given format. Then the new date should be the same as the given date. And then we can be sure that the given date is a valid date. So we have a new method. Before adding it to the formateDate method, let's test our new method. Let's head back to our test file and add a new testValidateDate method that accepts an input date and is valid that has our expectations. And let's get the actual return of the new validateDate method in an actual valid variable. And we can use this formatter that we previously set in the setup method. Then let's put the input date parameter and we use the assert same static method of the PHP unit test case. Now let's create a data provider for this test, the testValidateDate. And let's add a comment and let's move it to be above the previous data provider of the other test. And let's run our test. Our test successfully recognizes that an empty string is an invalid date. So let's add an invalid date, and the valid date is 9/9/2009 and is valid is true. And let's rerun our tests, and oh, test failed. Valid date is considered a non-valid one. Let's head back to our function and add a breakpoint and debug our test. And as we see, the date object is false, what means that I should flip the datetime create from format parameters. The first parameter should be a format, then the date. And rerun our test. And success! We have a working validateDate method. So now we can adjust the format date. So let's start create a variable results that contains an empty string. Let us ensure that we are handling exceptions. Then we ensure that only valid date can enter. Let's move the all to line inside the if body. And if all went fine, then our result variable should contain the finally formatted date. And finally return the result. Let's rearrange our code and let's add up to date comment. And let's rerun our tests.